Now, when chemists have mixed materials together, or they find some materials that are mixed, often they want to separate those mixtures again. And there's a few ways to separate mixtures. So a good example I've got here, or the first example I'll talk about here, is magnetic separation. So here I've got some sulfur, so that's just a yellow powder. I've also got some iron filings, so it's just a little bit of metal. And if I mix those two things together, I'll have a mixture of iron and sulfur powder. And how will I get them apart? So basically the answer to that is I get a magnet. And magnetic separation involves using a magnet to collect the magnetic parts of a mixture and separating them from the non-magnetic parts. So in this example, iron is magnetic and sulfur is not magnetic. So when I put the magnet over the top of the mixture, the iron comes out of the mixture and the sulfur stays in the mixture. So that's one way of separating things. Another way of separating materials is via something called filtration. So let's say I had a mixture of sand and water. What I would do is I'd get a little bit of filter paper. So this is this triangular tunnel here, this little triangular cone here. And what I would do is put this, it's made of paper, this is called filter paper. I'd put my mixture of sand and water into this filter paper. What happens then is the water particles are a lot smaller than sand. So the water particles actually drip down here and all the water collects down the bottom. But the sand, because it doesn't fit through the filter paper, all the sand stays up the top in this filter paper. So after I've filtered something, I end up with the thing which doesn't go through the filter paper at the top and the thing which does go through the filter paper at the bottom. So in this example, I've filtered sand out of sandy water. So that's another way to separate mixtures, that's filtration. Another way to separate mixtures is something called sieving. It's fairly similar to filtration, but you can do it with two solids. So here I've got some sand and I've got some gravel. So gravel is big, sand is small, and this sieve, so this is a sieve here, this thing here. So this sieve, this has got holes in it which are big enough to allow the sand to go through. Sand goes through here and collects down the bottom, but the gravel is too big to go through. So after I've sieved it, the sand's at the bottom and then the gravel's at the top, and again I've separated a mixture. Yet another way to separate mixtures is by something called evaporation. So here, in fact, in this container here, I've actually got a mixture of salt and water. And so how do I get the salt out of the water? It's soluble salt, so it's dissolved in the water. So how can I get the salt out? Well, what I could do there is basically I could apply a source of heat here. So this is probably a bit of fire. That's my drawing of fire there. So you put fire onto the bottom of this container and heat up the water and the salt. What will actually happen then is the water vapor will travel up into the air, and you can actually collect that somehow up here if you wanted to, but the water vapor will travel up here into the air, but the salt particles, they'll all stay down the bottom of this container because they won't turn from a solid to a gas. So the water actually changed from a liquid to a gas, and that's how we were able to collect the water, but the salt will stay as a solid down the bottom, and then we'll be able to separate the salt from the water. So by evaporation is another way that we can separate a mixture.